Hello there! Remember when I said,
As mentioned, the story is relayed by Egyptians, maybe not just because they were an ancient civilization even by Greek standards. Towards the end of the Bronze Age, Egypt was attacked by these so-called Sea Peoples. More on them in a future episode.
oof, the difference in audio quality. Anyway, today is the future. Today is the episode that I promised back in season 1. We will talk about the mysterious sea peoples. We will try to find out who they were, where they came from, and what lasting impact their people had on the history of the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. One of the first mentions of the Sea Peoples comes from Ramesses II, who encountered them in the second year of his long reign. Boastfully, he describes how he repelled the attack of the Sherden in the Nile Delta. In his words, "As for the Sherden of rebellious mind, whom none could ever fight against, who came bold-hearted, they sailed in warships from the midst of the sea, those whom none could withstand. But he, Ramesses, plundered them by the victories of his valiant arm, they being carried off to Egypt." While victory was achieved, he also lets the reader know that these pirates would be a continued threat for Egypt. From this text, we also learn he actually captured and recruited quite a few of the Sherden to use as shock troops in his wars against the Hittite Empire. In the aftermath of the famous Battle of Kadesh, Ramesses mentioned the Sherden further. I think this battle deserves an episode of its own, but to put it briefly, the battle ended in a stalemate. Both empires too spent to continue, while the propaganda machines of either claimed victory. Ramesses blamed the outcome on the tactic of splitting his army into smaller columns for more mobility. Supposedly, it was the Sherden who advised him to do that. In this way, the pharaoh was able to burden the negative consequences on the foreigners under his command, while boasting about his personal achievements in the battle. We can't say for certain if the Sherden really advised him on that day, but it is possible. Either way, they ended up being a convenient scapegoat. So, who were the Sherden? There is a people group mentioned in the Amarna letters, more about that in an episode linked on the screen, called the Sirdano people that are aggressive sea raiders and mercenaries. It is not quite clear, but linguistically close enough that these could be the same as the Sherden. If so, they had been pirates in the Eastern Mediterranean for a few decades before their attack on the Nile Delta. Where they came from is much harder to assess, as we only really hear about them from their raiding targets. It is unknown if the Sherden possessed a written language of their own. This is why we have to go by their depictions and compare them to other depictions of seafaring raiders. Their starkest feature are the horned helmets. Yeah, these guys were Vikings before it was cool. As it so happens, bronze sculptures of warriors with horned helmets were found on Sardinia, which also fit the time period of the late Bronze Age. The people that created them are known to archaeologists as the Nuragic civilization, but some suggest that the helmets are enough evidence to identify them as the Sherden. Now, the helmets alone would be flimsy evidence at best. However, a large study, dubbed the Shardana Project, linked the Nuragic culture further to the Sherden by showing that the pottery of these people could be found all over the Eastern Mediterranean, like Crete, Cyprus, and Syria. This could just mean that the Nuragic people were known as good crafters and thus sold their pottery. However, archaeologists also found stashes of weapons that align with the depictions of the Sherden. In other words, it is very much likely that the Nuragic culture were warriors, and that the spread of their pottery is rather a sign of their belongings they took with them for provisions. The final piece of connection is a slight linguistic similarity between Sherden and Sardinia. In the end, we cannot say with absolute certainty if this is enough to link the Sherden to this origin, but it is the strongest contender we have for now. But the Sherden were just one tribe among the sea people. Let's discuss the next, which might be the most well-known actually, for their prominent appearance in the Torah and the Bible. The Philistines, or Pelased as they were known to the Egyptians, are the people of the legendary Goliath, the giant of a man that was slain by David. Let's start in Egypt again, with Ramesses III, who was a descendant of the second of his name. Just like his forebear, he had to repel an attack by sea raiders, which according to him were responsible for the collapse of the Hittite Empire, among others. It is true that the activity of the Sea People coincidences with the decline of the civilization, along with the Mycenaeans and the Mitanni kingdoms. Correlation, however, doesn't imply causation. Anyway, these invasions were less military campaigns and more attempts to settle the area, as the Sea Peoples did not just come with combatants, but with their families in tow. It was also not just a palisade, but a wide array of people that are listed as Danyan, Shekelesh, Tieka, and Veshesh. Let's still focus on the Philistines, as they had the biggest impact on written history. Ramesses' many years of campaigning ended up in victory, according to him. Nonetheless, the Philistines settled southern Canaan and founded several city-states that were allied in a loose confederation. Surprisingly, there is actually little to no archaeological evidence that the Philistines took the area by force. That of course does not mean that they didn't use force, as written sources are rather explicit about that. Next, the Philistines waged a series of wars against the Israelites, which is described in the Book of Judges and famously the books of Samuel, in which they actually capture the Ark of the Covenant until they are finally defeated by David, who slays their champion Goliath in one-on-one combat. The story of a duel might seem far-fetched, but it is plausible. Many sources indicate that at the time a duel of champions was preferred over lengthy and bloody battles, if both sides believed they had a suitable fighter for it. It is also possible for a weapon as simple as a sling to be very much lethal. Perhaps Goliath, or whoever served as his inspiration, hoped to charge his opponent before the bullet hit a vital part of his body. Still, fighting continued for centuries after this duel. Unlike the Shurden, for the Philistines we do have written sources that point us to their origin. The Israelites told us they were from Kaptor, which is speculated to be Crete by modern historians. Archaeological evidence, like pottery, linked the Philistines to an origin in Greece, or the Aegean Sea as well. There also was a Syro-Hittite people group known as the Palestine or Valestin that supposedly lost their kingdom in Syria. So it is possible that these people moved south and became the Philistines. The name appears in several different sources and linguistically connects to the names Palisade and Philistines. This doesn't really line up with Egyptian and Israelite sources, however, that point to the Aegean as their origin or their description as sea raiders. Genetic studies also linked skeletons found in Philistine graves to DNA typical for southern Europe. This, too, however, is flimsy evidence, as the genome of ancient people is still largely unknown to us and the DNA of some individual cannot lead us to make assumptions about the larger group. Let's go with the written sources for this one and say they are of Aegean origin. So, if the Philistines were Aegean and the Shurden from Sardinia, that leaves us with one final yet big question. Why did they go and become raiders in the Eastern Mediterranean? Again, that is not a question we can answer with certainty, but likely explanations are economic decline in their homes and natural disasters. For one, as we can see in the Egyptian sources, the Sea People did not just come with warriors, but their entire families and livestock in tow. That means they left their homes with no intention of ever returning. Such drastic measures are usually only taken if life is no longer feasible where they came from, whether they were pushed out by another people group, like the Huns pushed the Germanic tribes in the Great Migration period, or if changing weather was the culprit, similarly to the Norse, who turned to settle in Britain to escape the ever harsher weather conditions of Scandinavia, we cannot say. It could even be a combination of both. What we can say is that all sea peoples had a lasting impact on their new homes, being linked to the toppling of once mighty empires, founding powerful and long-lasting kingdoms of their own, and leaving linguistic and cultural marks that can be seen even to this day. For a long time, they were even single-handedly blamed for the so-called Bronze Age collapse. Nowadays, we believe they were at most a contributing factor. This concludes our episode. There's still a lot to learn about the sea peoples, so I encourage you to look into them. Other than that, thanks again for watching and supporting this channel by leaving likes, comments and subscriptions. Of course, I also thank my wonderful artist. Until next time, bye. What do you mean, see people? Of course I see people. I have a life, I go out. Nah, not really.